I still remember the 60s like it was yesterday. It was a decade that seemed to crackle with electricity. Change was in the air and you could feel it everywhere, from the music on the radio to the protests in the streets. If you grew up during this time, you know what I mean. Things were shifting. Some of it was thrilling, some of it was heartbreaking, but none of it was boring. Politically, the decade kicked off with John F. Kennedy becoming president. Young, charismatic, and full of promise, JFK gave us hope. I remember watching his speeches on our black and white TV. He made us believe we could put a man on the moon. And by 1969, we did just that. I sat glued to the set as Neil Armstrong took that first step. But the dream didn't last forever. In 1963, the world stopped when Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas. I'll never forget where I was. Nobody will. It felt like the air got sucked out of the country. The civil rights movement was another front line of change. I remember the courage of people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., especially his "I Have a Dream" speech in 1963. We watched footage of Selma, of fire hoses and police dogs, and you knew something had to give. The Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts were big victories, but it wasn't easy. The decade had its share of riots, tension, and heartache. And when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, it felt like we'd lost a part of our conscience. But it wasn't all heavy. The 60s were also a blast in other ways. The Beatles landed in America in '64, and suddenly, everything changed. We went from doo-wop and crooners to mop tops and electric guitars. Music festivals like Woodstock in 1969 weren't just concerts, they were a whole movement. I still have the vinyls. Bob Dylan, the Supremes, the Rolling Stones, they were the soundtrack of our youth. Pop culture exploded too. Television was booming. We watched The Andy Griffith Show, Bewitched, and Star Trek in our living rooms. Barbie dolls, G.I. Joe, and easy bake ovens filled our homes. And let's not forget the fashion. Miniskirts, bell-bottoms, tie-dye, and go-go boots. You couldn't walk down the street without seeing someone making a statement. The Vietnam War cast a long shadow over America. At first it felt distant, but as more names we knew ended up on draft lists, or worse, didn't come home, it got very real. The protests started small but grew loud. Kent State would come later, but the seeds were planted in our living rooms with every news broadcast. The 60s were a wild ride. They taught us how to dream big, how to fight for what's right, and how to survive heartbreak. It was a time like no other, messy, magical, and unforgettable.